Delany's Babel 17 encodes two very different fantasies about language and leaves out another older fantasy about language. I'm interested here in the dog that doesn't bark as well, the fantasy that's traditional that Delany is not interested in. First, Babel 17 is clearly a demonstration of the strong version of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, whose name Delany did not at the time of writing know, which the strong version holds that like the language you think in limits what you can think. We think in language, this is true. We tend to think in language or in semiotic terms. And the idea here is if you don't have the word for something, you can't think the concept. This has turned out not to be true in the last 50 years of work and is easily disproved. The Gaelic language has no words for yes or no. In Gaelic, you have to actually answer the question. That doesn't mean they don't they don't have a concept for yes or no. They or agreeing or disagreeing. They can disagree with you just fine. The subtler and softer version of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is that language, the syntax, the vocabulary, the set of signifiers and signifieds in our language shape our thinking, influence it in ways that are not conscious to us because we think through the medium of language, and that medium shapes our perception. This, I think, both research and Delany still stick to. Delany himself has produced the fact that he didn't know the name Sapir-Whorf hypothesis at the time, although he had the concept as kind of a disproof of the strong version. There's also the sense that Babel 17, this language that gives you superpowers, that it gets very close to the status of a language that, with some deliberate exceptions, is very close to the meaning of the thing, where the slippage between the signifier and the signified is limited, so that Ridra, thinking in Babel 17, gets an idea about great circles and gravity and managed to re-navigate her ship using marbles, partly because the concept of circle in the word for circle in Babel 17 encodes the concept that this is a more analytic language that actually, where the word corresponds to the thing more closely, where it's more embodied, where there's less of a slippage between the word and the thing. Delany, as a post-structuralist, is very interested in his later career in that slippage between the word and the thing. Here he's interested in the fantasy of a language that first of all, where the word and the thing are very closely aligned, more than in other languages, and where, in this case, it gives you essentially superpowers. It makes you smarter. It makes Ridra think so fast. It heats up her metabolism. It speeds up her metabolism, so she's warmer in the cold. Where she and the butcher do all kinds of kind of super spy antics because they're thinking in this language, which is also compared to a computer language, a language for processing, for thinking. Though I point out there that in that language, they are also unable to make decisions. It's also a language of control. The language shapes them in a way that controls them. So they're both empowered, but be turned into pawns by the invaders and have to deal with a kind of schizoid process. What Delany is not interested is in the myth of an original language. The word Babel refers to the myth of the Tower of Babel, a story in the book of Genesis about how languages diverged. The myth is that before the building of the Tower of Babel and the God of the Hebrews' angry punishment for it, everyone spoke the same language. Everyone understood each other. The arrogance of Nimrod by building the Tower of Babel, trying to reach heaven, led Yahweh not only to cast it down, but to create a confusing multiplicity of languages. Delany does not want to get back to a moment before confusing multiplicity of languages. He likes them. Ridra is a polyglot. In this novel, multiplicity of languages, being able to think in multiple languages, is the way to be smarter, not getting back to an authentic language. Now, the myth of an original language generally goes with that fantasy number two, of there being little or no slippage between the word and the thing. Here, there's no slippage in the word or the thing, not because Babel 17 is original, because it has been so carefully crafted. It is a new language, and the solution of Babel 17 is not to go back to Babel 16, Babel 15, Babel back to Babel 1 or Babel 0 is Babel prime. The point is to go to Babel 18, to keep moving forward. Delany is always ideologically associated with progress. He wants to keep moving forward.